Legito will help you manage the lifecycle of contracts and other documents, automate document drafting, efficiently build custom applications, collaborate, negotiate contracts, digitally sign documents, and improve your performance. Each Legito component works together seamlessly to provide a powerful solution. Legito is a no-code, enterprise-ready, and fully customizable platform. Let's get started with a quick high-level overview. Legito Document Lifecycle Management will let your organization easily create document workflows. Legito will make sure that everybody follows the correct process. That includes internal and external sharing, approvals, document changes, and reminders. Document drafting automation allows your experts to efficiently build your templates using Legito's unique AI-powered template editor that suggests logical dependencies. Selections and inputs may be created contextually inside Legito Smart Documents. Data from Legito Smart Documents are automatically extracted. Legito Objects is a rapid, out-of-the-box way to build customized applications that meet your business needs. Increase your automating power exponentially by creating objects such as client and vendor management lists, tailor-made case management tools, property reports, customizable knowledge repositories, and countless other possibilities. Use your Legito workspace to collaborate and negotiate either Legito Smart Documents or Microsoft Office documents. Legito has all the features you would expect. Track changes, compare, comments, real-time conversations, notifications, and so much more. Use Legito Sign embedded into your Legito workspace to digitally sign contracts and other documents with your counterparties. Additional e-signature providers such as Adobe Sign or DocuSign are also integrated to your workspace. Legito tracks all events and actions in your workspace, as well as all choices and data in Legito Smart Documents. Legito then analyzes this structured and categorized data to give you valuable insights into your documents, projects, and processes. Legito is more than software. Once you sign up with Legito, you're joining a community. We want you to get the most out of your investment. We offer additional resources free of charge to help you get better acquainted with top tips and tricks to utilize Legito's robust products and achieve more with Legito thanks to industry insights and best practice advice. Our step-by-step interactive courses will educate you quickly to become a Legito Power user, and our categorized and detailed knowledge base will empower you to confidently tackle any situation. Let's connect to explore how Legito can help you achieve more and reach your goals faster.
Welcome to you all. Thanks again for joining us. Those of you who are regular listeners will know that we have a quarterly update where we tell you about all the new things in Legito, and every quarter there's stuff to tell you. Shortly, I'm going to hand over to Mark Settle. Mark looks after our US operations with his team, but he's also the best person to present this webinar because he has a huge wealth of experience of actually putting Legito to work in organizations. So we'll hand over to Mark in a second. We're going to do Q&A at the end. There's a facility on your screen to send questions over. If we don't get through them all, we'll come back to you afterwards, and I'll curate the questions later. I'll speak to you later, and hello, Mark.
All right. Thank you, Charles. Appreciate the introduction. Very excited to bring you our webinar content today, everyone. And we are going to cover what's new in Legito. And we haven't had this type of quarterly webinar for what's new for a few months because we had our user conference over the summer and covered some of that at the conference as well. So I'm really going to dive back through much of the summer and recent months with new features today. Before I do that, though, I recognize that we'll have plenty of people on the call that are new to Legito. We are going to dive into existing or new features in the product and kind of dive deep today into specific features. So I would highly recommend, if you want an overview of Legito, there was a video that played at the beginning of the webinar today that is available on our website as a great starting point, as well as some other webinar recordings that you can find in our blog area of our website that will give you a nice overview of Legito as well. So just to talk a little bit about us and then dive into the new features. So Legito is a company that was founded back in 2014 by a lawyer technologist who was working to solve a problem within his business. So generating documents, wanted to do it in a better, faster, more efficient way. He built something for himself that grew into the product that Legito is today. And we now have customers in over 50 countries. We're used by Fortune 500 companies. And you can see a few of our customers there on the screen. So what is Legito? It's an end-to-end no-code automation platform for back office professionals. So what do we mean by that? Well, back office professionals are commonly building documents, tracking the processes around them, working through documents, signature process, tracking and analyzing the data that comes through that. And so they have all of these processes that they need to manage around this type of content that can be error prone, that they need to reduce risk, that they want to make sure they're doing faster. And so Legito provides solutions to facilitate that. And so Legito includes things like automated document drafting, workflow processes, deadline tracking, digital signature processes, the ability to build custom applications with Legito objects, data analysis, and much, much more. But like I said, we're going to dive into what's new with Legito. And like I said, I'm going to cover most of the summer and the recent months with Legito. And so as I went back to look at that, I thought, okay, let me make a list of all of the new features and we can demonstrate those on the webinar today. And that list started to look something like this. That's a lot of text. That's a lot of new features. And so what that boils down to is there are over 45, that's where I stopped counting, new features that have been added into the software in the last 8 months. That's phenomenal, in my opinion. I've worked in software industry for over 20 years, and that is just a rapid pace of development. And that is not, hey, we're fixing this item or anything like that. This is all new features bringing value to our customers and improving what our software can do for you to help you be efficient in your business. And so I have to start out the webinar today with a shout out to Team Legito. This is some of our team, not all. We continue to grow. This picture is back from the time of our user conference. But there's a lot of individuals that have put in a lot of time and effort to bring this type of success to the product. And there are those that are behind the scenes that often think they go unnoticed, but they do not go unnoticed. And just a kudos to this team and what they've been able to accomplish over the last year. Very proud to be a part of this organization. All right, so with that, let's actually talk about some of the key new features that we'll demonstrate today, and some that we won't be able to demonstrate, but we'll certainly speak to here on this slide, and that'll make sense in a moment. Legito Sign. So Legito Sign was released early in the summer, and Legito Sign is our digital signature platform. So that allows you within Legito to send a document out for e-signature, mark where the signatures need to be, add other date, name, other signature information into the signature blocks, send that out for signature, just like a DocuSign or Adobe Sign or other e-signature platform, but without having to license one of those tools. And so you can send that document out. Somebody can receive an email with a link. They click that link. They can digitally sign the document. No license required by the people signing to sign those documents, and complete that e-signature, then pull that signed PDF into Legito for tracking. So Legito Sign is great. We'll take a look at that today. Clause Library. So Clause Library is a great new feature to really facilitate smart maintenance of your content and to reduce risk or error. So Clause Library would be, I've got a number of different templates and I've got a common clause I use across those documents. So let's say I'm working with contracts and I have an indemnification clause across 10 or 15 different contracts that I manage within my business. Well, I want to break that indemnification clause out into an individual clause that I can maintain singularly. So I can build that as a clause in a clause library and then refer to it in all the templates that need that language. And so what that means is when I need to make an update to that clause, I make it in one place, and all templates that need to use that are immediately updated by reference. And so I'm going to ensure that I've got correct language, and I'm going to make the management of that language easier. So we'll take a look at Clause Library today as well. Great new feature from Legito. Object updates. So Legito objects, if you're not familiar with them, you can create custom built objects in Legito to manage processes within your business. And so let's say I work with, the example we're going to use today, you'll see in a minute, is say maybe I'm real estate and I have a list of tenants. I can actually create a tenant object with their name and address and other information about that tenant. And then I can store that data in Legito. Well, we've over the last number of months, we've continued to optimize and add features and functionality around those objects. And so some of the most recent ones are references. So actually being able to refer to an object in a template. And what I mean by that is you can have a question or a select that is linked to an object list so that the user simply selects an object, and then you can link to the data in that selected object in your documents so that users are not rekeying data that they're already storing in those objects. We've also added the ability to share those objects, to add workflow to those objects so that you can build processes around them. Some new document features. There are quite a few here. I'm going to list a few of them, and we'll show all of these and more in the demonstration today. But we've added continuous and next page sections. So you can now break your Legito templates into sections. Associated with those sections, you can assign page size, page orientation, margins, columns associated with those sections. You can now add new line breaks before or after elements, so you can get these, soft returns. They're often called, or new lines after a specific element, whether it be in a table or a list or whatever it may be. I can now add default values to elements inside of a Legito template, and that default can even be conditional. So I want to default this to this if this value is this, or I want to default it to this if that value is something else. And so you can really start to have some smart default values in your documents as users complete them. We've added a page number element and many other features as well. So a few features here I want to discuss that I will not demonstrate today, but I want to discuss them before we jump into the demonstration. We've added some off-the-shelf customization for single sign-on. And what that means is, say you use Azure Active Directory within your business as your single sign-on, and you now subscribe to Legito and you want to tie into that so users don't have to create a separate username and password in Legito to access it. That used to be an integration process to get a single sign-on. We've been able to do it for a long time, but it took a bit more effort. It wasn't just configuration by your system administrator. And we've moved that single sign-on into a configuration within the application. So it really facilitates single sign-on for our end users. Easy JSON integration. So if you're not familiar with what JSON is JavaScript object notation. It is a way to represent data that is a common syntax for representing data across applications. And what I mean by that is, say you use Salesforce or you use Jira or you use Microsoft Dynamics, all of those applications will have APIs that you can use to get data out of those applications. And now you use Legito and you want to get data out of those applications and push them into Legito. Well, Legito has a way to store data, but Salesforce has a different way to store data, and Jira does, and Dynamics do. They each have their own way of storing data, but they typically adhere to that JSON object notation. And so what would have to happen in the past to integrate applications is some code would have to be written as part of an integration to say, I want this data point in Salesforce to go to this data point in Legito. And what easy JSON integration is now a no-code approach to that process. So you can configure a JSON integration within the administration settings in Legito. You can upload an example JSON file out of your target application. So say Salesforce, upload a Salesforce JSON file. And then in that JSON file, you can link this data point to this template element in Legito to use for your integration. So now that becomes a no-code configuration process rather than having to write code. So really facilitates easy integration into other applications. And then we did release this summer a Net Documents integration as well, which will allow you within Legito to save your documents directly to Net Documents. So you can add an additional link into your action menu that says Save to Net Documents. It prompts you to fill out your profile fields, and then you can send those documents into Net Documents. So there's some great new features there as well. But let's dive into a demonstration. So with that, I'm going to get into a Legito workspace. So I'm going to start with clause library today. I've got just a simple demonstration workspace on the screen here that we're going to use for all of our demo today. I've got two templates in this workspace, a retail property lease and a residential property lease. Very simple lease templates that we'll take a look at. Not overly complex, but we're going to use them to show off some of the new features and functionality. And I've got a few example documents in here as well. We're going to jump into clause library first, but to do that, let's actually open up for edit our retail property lease template. So I'm going to go ahead and open that up in the template editor because I want to point out some of the language here in this lease, and then we'll use it for various items as well. So this is Sky Properties, fictitious company with just an example lease. And you can see I've got kind of my preamble that's going to include who the lease is with, the tenant and their details, the date of the lease. And then it gets into the actual body of the agreement. It's going to have all the different terms and language. And so each of those are numbered paragraphs. And well, let's use as an example this base rent clause here. So this base rent clause, let's say I've got a retail and a residential lease, and I want to manage this as an individual clause because maybe I've got 10 other leases I'm going to add into the system, and I want my base rent language to always be the same. So I've got this clause here in my retail lease, and it's already got a system name that I've given it, base rent clause. What I want to do is I want to create a clause in my clause library for this and then reference it. So we're going to leave this template open. We're going to go back to our main tab here, and I'm going to go ahead and go to the clause library. So clause library is very similar to what you'd see in a templates list, but we're creating kind of mini templates, if you will, template snippets that can then be referred to in other templates. And so you can see I've got a number of clauses I've already created here, an indemnification clause, repairs, waiver, no waiver, even the signature block that can be merged into the template. Let's create a new clause for our base rent section. So similar to creating a new template, I just say new clause. I'll give it a name. We'll call it base rent. We'll leave our description blank in this case and just click create. So this is going to open up the template editor. This process is going to look very familiar. And this gives you a lot of advantages, right? Because you're creating basically a mini template that can be inserted. So I could import some Word content if I want to for this clause. I can import from a whole automated template as a clause. In this case, I'm going to start from scratch, and I'll show you why in just a moment. So I'm just going to go ahead and say start from scratch. And I'm going to, because our retail property lease already has an identified base rent paragraph, I'm just going to import that as a new article. And so if you haven't done this before, there's this great feature, insert existing article, that will let me grab an article from any template suite. So I'm just going to go ahead and find my retail property lease, and we'll grab the document there, and then we'll insert the base rent clause. So we'll import that content, and that's what I need. And so I don't need this article anymore, and I can get rid of that. And that quickly, I created a base rent clause that I can now manage in this clause, and I'll be able to insert it in all of the templates where it's needed. So I'll just go ahead and publish this. And we're actually all done with this. So we'll just go back to our clause library here, and we can go, we don't even have to do anything there. We'll go to our retail property lease. And now what we need to do is we need to insert this in place of our base rent clause. So we can just insert it and then delete the existing language. And so I now have this library option where I can see any of the clauses in my clause library. And just like any other element, I can drag and drop. So there's our brand new base rent clause. I can drag and drop that into my document. And then I can delete this existing language. And now I've got this clause. And you can see when I mouse over it, it says this is from the clause library. You manage it there. So now I've got this clause that's inserted from the clause library. And I can still make it conditional. But if I want to change anything in the content of this clause, I can't do it here. I need to go into the clause library and make that change. And so now I can reference clauses. And you can see I've got a few others in here. If we go down, indemnification is also pulling in that indemnification clause. And I've got others throughout the template. And so I can now have a template that is pulling from these different clauses. And I can really start to build out this very reusable pieces of text and manage it in a smarter way. So that's clause library. Let's jump on a couple of things, additional things around it, and then we'll look at Legito Sign. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. And let's say I wanted to make a clause dynamic. And what I mean by that is maybe I want to let the user select a clause. So I could create a question that has a list of options that are the clause names, and then dynamically insert that clause. So let me give you an example of that. And we're not going to build this whole thing out, but we do have this new ability to add a dynamic clause. So you can see I can drag and drop that into my document. And then it says clause to be inserted. I can click on that. And similar to a condition, I get this language that says, hey, what's the way, what's the criteria for inserting this clause? So I want to insert the clause from, and if I have different categories, I can select that. Whose name exactly matches, starts with, ends with. So I can build some different options of how I want to select this. and I can choose the value in an element. You can see there even JSON for the JSON integration in the template, retail property lease named, let's say tenant name. So I could actually type in tenant name, a clause name, and it would come in. So ideally, I'd have a question or a select there that would have the options for the user to select, and then I could dynamically insert a clause. But you can see when I build that out, then I just have this placeholder that says, hey, there's going to be a clause inserted here, and it's going to come from this value in the template. So I can really start to build out a very dynamic document with those clauses as well. We'll take that out. And then one last thing I want to show you with clauses, if we go back to our clause library, and let's take this signature block clause as an example, and we'll edit that. There was a new feature added because if I create a clause, I may need to be able to refer to elements in the template it's being inserted in. So in this case, in the signature block, I'm going to need to list the tenant name. Well, tenant name is an input field in my leases. So it's going to be in each of the leases. It doesn't exist in this clause. I certainly don't want to add a text input and have the user have to type that name again. So what I can do is I can create a link element, but we've added a new feature where you can now link to any template suite content with a given system name. And so you can see this link here. It says link to any template suite content with a system name, template name, or tenant name. And so it's actually going to link to, in the lease template here, you can see I've got an input field named tenant name. So whatever template this is inserted into, you would want to make sure you have a tenant name input field, but then that clause can refer to the value of that tenant name input field. So it gives you some flexibility to make sure you can still link to template elements in the template that the clause is being inserted into. So go ahead and close that signature block. So that's clause library, and a lot of great functionality there to allow you to build your templates and maintain them in a better way. So what I want to show you next, I'm going to go ahead and leave this open. We'll just go back to our parent tab here, and I'm going to go to my dashboard. I want to show you Legito Sign. So I've got a template already prepared here that we're going to sign. And keep in mind, these leases, the signature block, they show a notary. These probably would be documents that require an in-person signature, but we're going to digitally sign this with Legito Sign anyways, just to show you how it works. So I've got this residential property lease that is already ready to be sent off for signature. So I'm going to go ahead and click View. And here you can see I've got my lease. And down at the bottom of this lease, I've got a signature block. And I'm in a stage already that's ready for signature. So I've walked this through some of my workflow stages. Maybe there was a draft and a review and approval that all needed to happen. I've already skipped those steps and I'm ready to sign this document. So I need to send this out to the two parties that need to sign this. And you'll see I need to add a signature field, a name and a date for them as well. So I'm going to go ahead and click Start Signing. And you can see similar, if you've used our DocuSign or Adobe Sign integration and seen them, it's going to be a very similar process. I'm going to say sign with Legito Sign. And now it's going to prompt me for the parties that need to sign this document. So I've actually added the signature placeholders in this document that are available for Legito. So it knows I need two signatures. And so I can type those individuals in. I'll be one of them, put my email address in here. And actually, I've already forgotten who my person was. Should have looked. Erica Smith. We'll do this one more time. Erica Smith. And we're going to use just one of my email address aliases here so that the email still comes to me so that I can sign it. So I'm going to put those two parties in, and I'm going to send this. And I can control if they have to sign consecutively or if they can sign together as well. And so this is going to start the signature process. And similar to what you might see in a DocuSign or Adobe Sign, it's now going to bring up this document and allow me to place my signature fields in the document where they need to go. And because we use some placeholders, you'll see the signatures are actually going to be there already for me, and I can move them where I want. And then I need to just simply add in my name and date fields for these parties. And so right now, Mark is selected, so we can grab name and date. You can see the name is automatic based on the name we put in, and I can align these fields as I want. We'll choose Erica, and we'll put in her name and date. If I want that lined up pretty, I can do that. And then we can send this off for signature. So we'll go ahead and say Start Signing. And this is going to send this and route this out via email. So Mark and Erica, which are both going to go to my email address, are going to get an email that will allow them to click a link and sign it. So in fact, sorry, I'm looking off screen, but my email is off screen. I'll go ahead and open up that email and just bring it on screen here as an individual email when it decides to load. All right, email. All right, Gmail doesn't want to open the separate email, but I've got my link here, so I'm just going to open that. So what I did is I clicked the link to open in the email, and the document is going to open up for signatures. So we're signing as Mark at the moment. So we can just come in and we'll see our signature block as Mark. I can sign this, and then I'm all done. I just say confirm, and I'm done. It says, great job. I can download that document, or I'll get an email with the document attached once it's signed by everyone. And then we just sign as Erica as well. So we'll open that up for her. So kind of standard e-signature process you'd expect. So Erica will see that I've already signed. So when this comes up, all right. Do that one more time. So when this comes up, Erica can sign. She'll see that Mark's already signed, so she can see that signature, place her signature as well, confirm that, and the document we saved. And then the attached document will be routed to both users via email, and they'll be able to see it. And so just to show one that's already been executed, this will come in pretty quickly, but rather than wait for that, I can see right attached to the document record will be that signed PDF. So it'll be routed via email to all the parties that it was sent to, as well as attached back into the document record as the signed PDF. And then I also have a manage signings page where I can go in and see all of my signatures that I've executed through Legito Sign. I can download those documents from here as well. So that is Legito Sign. Really gives me some flexibility to not have to license a separate solution for digital signature and easily work that into my process inside of Legito. All right, so I want to go into some of the document changes and some of the things related to Legito objects that have been added. So before I do that, here on the dashboard, I want to point out, now I'm logged in as an administrator. A typical user wouldn't see all of the things that I'm seeing. But as an administrator, and if I choose to give certain users permission, they can see the custom objects or the Legito objects that I've built within the system. So I've actually built two different objects into this workspace, a US states object. So if I click on that, you'll see this is just a list of the US states. And we'll look at this in the template in a moment, but it's pretty common. You need to merge states in the United States into an address. And so I might want the state name, and sometimes I might want the postal abbreviation. So this is a nice way to just have a simple list of reusable data that I'm going to use a lot in my templates because I may have multiple addresses. So in this case, I'm creating kind of a reusable list with Legito objects. But retail tenants, this is, okay, well, I can gather a tenant name, but maybe I only have X number of retail tenants and they lease different properties from me. Then I can create a tenant object that I can manage that information with. So here you can see I've got a retail tenants Legito object that has various properties. It's got the legal business name, their website, their phone number, their address information, and I can manage that inside of Legito. I could even apply one of the new things. I could apply a workflow to this. I could have different workflow stages on these objects so that they need to go through a draft and an approval process so that I can only see and use and link to in my documents the currently approved tenants or whether it may be some certain stage that they're in. I can even share these objects as well. So right now these objects are only managed by administrators, but if I wanted to give access to a specific user, say Chris Green, and give him different either view or edit rights to this object, I can add that permission, and then Chris will be able to view and manage this object and its data as well. So I have this ability to now start to share and permission these objects and associate a workflow with them to help them drive my business. But let's also show you that object reference, being able to select these in a template. So with that, I'm going to go back to my retail lease that we've left open here. And I'm going to use two different examples. But before I do that specifically, I'm going to show you first with a select for the tenant state, because I want to show a few additional options and properties that have been added to select elements over the last number of months. So here I've got a select element. It's got the first 10 US states listed here because I was too lazy to type all 50. That's part of the problem that our custom object solves for us, is that I don't have to type these again. But here I've typed the first 10 states in. And so those are text options, and I can add more, of course, and I can reorder them and I can delete them. But another new option that's been added to selects is I do have an ability to sort these. So in the past, I need to make sure I enter them alphabetically, or I enter them all and then I reorder them to make them alphabetical. Well, now I can sort them very quickly right here within the custom or within the select element. So I can get a sort exactly like I want it to be. I can also refer to other elements in a select now. And so this reference option here, this is going to allow me to link to an input or some other input in my template. So let me give an example of that. It doesn't make sense here in state, but I'll just give an example. Let's say I were working on a will. So I'm in legal and I'm working on a will, and I gather a list of children for my client. And now I want to be able to select one of those children as the trustee in the will. And so I can add a reference and I can choose a specific input field. So in this case, I'll just choose tenant name, which is a text input. What's going to happen there is now when I go into the document and I'm filling it out, I answer tenant name. And then when I come to this dropdown and I click the dropdown, I'm going to see the tenant name as one of the options. If it were children and it's a repeated input, like we just mentioned in my example, then I would see all of the children's name as different options in my dropdown for me to select. So it really gives you some flexibility to select from a list of other users. And then before we go to objects, just one last nice change here to select elements is the ability to mark one of these options as no export. So you can see there, sorry, I did that kind of quickly, an option or a menu next to that option. If I click on that, I get an option setting that allows me to choose to check off this no export. Now let me give you a real use case for that. Let's say I have a drop-down list that 90% of the time they're going to select from my select options that I have in the list, but sometimes I need them to be able to provide something that's not in the list. So I can do two things. I can have the drop-down have an option now that's other, and I just check no export on that other because I don't want other to be merged into my document. And so if I had other and they selected it here, that would be merged in unless I checked that no export. And no export will then make sure they can choose other, and then other is not merged into the document. And now I can put a text element, a text input element next to this that's conditional, so that when they choose other, they get a text input field to add their custom option. So that's just one example of a use case for that no export on options in a select. So a lot of nice new features there around the select element. It's a very commonly used element in your documents. And so we're continuing to add there to make sure it meets all of your business needs in your templates. But now the cool part. So object records. I've got a list of US states and a custom object that I've created, and I simply want to be able to select from that list of states. So to do that, now I've got this tab in my select that says object records. So rather than use this list of options at all, I can just go to object records, and it's going to give me a few drop downs here. And I can actually choose which object I want to link to. So we're going to link to our US states. And then which property I want to use as the value for this select. And so I'm going to use the property name. Now I also have a label. It's an optional property. And this is just going to add a parenthetical text to my drop-down options. So maybe what I'm merging in isn't as unique an identifier for helping the user select. So I can add this optional label that helps them see some additional data from the object to make their selection. And then I can even choose a filter as well. So let's say I was using a workflow stage and I wanted to show only the approved objects. So I can create a filter in my US states, well, I wouldn't do that in states, but let's say tenants, I can create a filter for a workflow stage for only approved tenants. And then I can filter this selection to only the approved tenants so that the user makes an appropriate selection from the object data. But with just that, I'm just going to use US states and the name. And you'll see here really quickly, if I just save this and test it, when I go into my document and I'm completing it, now for the state dropdown, rather than seeing a list of states that I've typed in, I'm seeing a live link to all of the states that are in my object data. And so I've got 50 states there. And so I see the 50 states here, and I can make a selection, and I can even search, right? So I can start typing Georgia and make that selection. So now I'm selecting from live object data that I'm managing within my workspace. And if I need to select a state in 15 different places, I can now link all of those selects to the single state list, similar to the benefit of a clause. Now I'm getting the benefit of a single list that I can select from, or actual client data. So let's do the same with the tenant, right? I don't have to type in the tenant name for retail leases. I have a list of my retail tenants. I want to be able to select the tenant and then pull in all of this address information anyways. I don't even want to have to select the state for their address because I already have it in my retail tenant information. So let's close this. Let's make a few changes. And this will give us a chance to show off a few other nice features in Legito as well. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to replace this with a select because we don't want to have to type in the tenant name. So we're just going to go ahead and right click, say replace, and replace it with a select. And then we're going to click on that select, and we'll choose object records again, and we'll choose retail tenants this time, and we'll choose the tenant name. So with that, now I've got a select similar to what we did with state. So very simple. And now the user can select that. Now, where I had linked to the text input tenant name, I've now replaced that with a select. So I need to change this link to the select that I created. So I'm going to link to the select and the retail lease named. Well, actually, we've got a nice suggestion there, but we'll go ahead and do it manually. And now you can see, because I'm linked to a list of objects, it says, and insert the value from property. And it gives me the list of the object properties. So I can actually link to any property in that object's data. So now I can list here, I need to link to the name. But here now I need to replace these address fields to link to the different address properties. So let me show you a nice quick thing here with a new feature that was released. So you can multi-select objects in Legito. So I can click on these 4 objects and I can select them all. But recently we've added this bulk actions menu. Well, I've got these text inputs and a dropdown. Well, I don't need those anymore. I need links. And so I can select all 4 of these. And rather than having to drag in some links or deleting them and dragging in some links, I can now come to this bulk actions. And with multiple elements selected, I actually have a replace with menu. And I can hit this replace with menu and come down and say link. And now I've got 4 links. And I can now come in and click on these links. And I can link to the select. But here I want to insert address. And there's a nice benefit here of, if you ever try to do this quickly, I can just apply a recent link and just change this. So this quickly, we can just do this city, state, and zip. And now if we save and test our template, I may have some other changes I would need to make in this template. But with that, now I can come in and I can see my different retail clients. And you can see as I make those selections, I can see my address change to whatever the information is for that particular client. And so we're linking directly to business data within our Legito objects within the workspace. So quite a powerful piece of information in the system that I can grab that keeps me from having to rekey data. So I can manage this kind of list of data in my system. And there are even APIs around objects, so you could push that data from another system into Legito to be able to select from it in a similar way that we just did. So nice, powerful feature in Legito for building smarter document content. All right, so just a few additional items we want to show you before we wrap up and get to questions. And I apologize, I'm looking this way. I'm just looking at my notes to make sure I'm covering everything that I wanted to cover. So one nice new feature that really facilitates things for a template editor is this ability to have labels in the template. And you may have noticed these when I was scrolling a little bit earlier, but off to the right, you can see these labels showing up that are pointing to a specific element or clause. Legito added this ability to add labels for certain criteria that will always show up in your template. And that is managed in the editor settings. So if I go to my editor settings, you can see here it says, show label on hover. I can choose whether or not I want the label to show on hover or not. And then I can choose what labels I want to pin. And so those are ones that would always show. And you can see I've got a few of those checked. So I'm pinning labels for article, paragraph, and subparagraph. But if I'm going deep enough into the pointer item, I don't pin those labels. And then I can pin labels with certain criteria. Do I want to pin labels because there's a system name, or because there's a condition, or because there's a repeat? And so you can see this paragraph has a system name and it has a condition on it. And so I see a label for both of those, and they're always available. And you might think, well, why is that really important? We already get some visual cues for certain things. I get a visual cue for the condition with that green line around it. Well, a couple of reasons are really handy. Number one, if you've got a very long and complex template and you're doing either smart loading or collapsing some of the clauses, the labels are still available, right? So if I collapse this clause, I can still see both the condition and the system name associated with that clause. And that can be very valuable, because depending on the way the numbering works and how much text is actually in your clause, if it's collapsed, it might be a little bit harder to identify. But now with a label, you can give it a name and easily identify that clause. So these labels really facilitate understanding the structure and content of your template quite a bit. The last thing I want to show you here is find an update and find before we jump into sections. Sorry, not the very last thing. The last thing here in this template I want to show you is in this find. So if I can do some finding in my template, let's say I want to search for retail. You can see my normal find that I've had in the past. It will highlight all of those items and I can kind of toggle through them. But let's say now I want to make anything related to retail that it's like it's just showing me the tenant name things that I linked to, but I want to make them all bold. I want to make sure they're all bolded in my document. Well, now I have this option when I'm searching to choose all. And you can see as soon as I click that, all of the elements are multi-selected that met my search criteria. So I've got handles on all of those, letting me know they're selected. And now I can go to design and I can say, oh, I want them all italicized or all bold. So I can make some changes very quickly in my document by making certain search criteria and just selecting all the elements that meet that search criteria. And then I can make some updates in my document. And the great thing about that is if you haven't used find in the template editor very much, I can search by text, but I can also search for a specific condition and select all those elements. I can search for a specific repeat or link and make changes to it by using that choose all in the bulk selection. So quite a powerful feature for making quick updates to your template that need to be made all throughout it in your template. All right, so I want to jump into the residential lease to just finish up and show you a little bit around some of the section changes that we've added to our template editor. So I'm going to go ahead and close this template. And we'll come back to, we'll just go to our templates page and open for edit our residential property lease. Now this lease looks very similar to our other lease. You can see it's very similar, but it's a little bit shorter. But what I've done here is at the end of this lease, I've added an additional next page section. So if I want to add a section to a template, I can just say, you can see for a new page section, I can just say I want a new page section and it will add that section, or I can remove it. So I have this ability to add and remove sections. And then within that section, I can define a specific header, footer, and other properties. So within that section, if I click on this next page section, here I have an edit handle. And on that edit handle, I've now got properties and design related to this section. So if I go to the design tab, I can choose what paper type, what number of columns I have, what number of columns, what the column settings are for that section. I can set up a specific margin. And you can see here, I'm actually using a different header and footer in this section as well, so that I have a different header and footer. I've got different margins applied to this section. And so if we were to save this and test this really quickly, you can see when this section comes into the document, it looks different. And because we don't see the headers and footers here, we could save and download this document to view it. But I'll show you another nice recently released feature in Legito, which is print preview. So if I don't want to have to download and open up this file, I can just go to the action menu after I've saved and go to print preview. and it will load me a PDF rendering of that document right here inside my browser, and I'll be able to review that. I don't know if that's because I'm sharing my screen. Should be super duper quick. I'll do that one more time. Had the same thing with another page not wanting to load. There we go. Sometimes when you share your screen, I don't know what it is about that. So here we've got a lease agreement. So this is the actual document. I can see headers and footers. This is a print preview as if I were to have downloaded and opened this up in a PDF. I can see my lease information. And then with that next page section down at the bottom, it's really just an example document, but here you can see different header, different footer, different margins in this section to show that you can really create different sections in the document without having to use any kind of separated documents or advanced layout design or any other feature in Legito. Simply sections, both next page sections or continuous sections. So if I wanted columns in the middle of my document, I could add a continuous section break here after this article. And then I could define for this continuous section, I can go to design and say, I want 2 columns for this and set up my column settings and then add information into those columns and get those columns displayed in my document as well. So I really have some flexibility to build out different sections with different formatting for each of those sections inside of my documents. And then along with that as well, we add a nice new page element that you could add into your header or footer to do page numbering. And so here you can see, I scroll down here, I've got a page number element. It's actually added into this footer here. And I've got specific properties. What page numbering format do I want? Do I want it on all pages? Does it continue from the previous section to allow you to do page numbering the way that you need to in your Legito templates? So that's a lot of our new features. I've touched on quite a few of them. There's many more that I didn't touch on. But as I said at the beginning of the slide presentation, 45 plus new features over the last number of months. Quite an accomplishment. We've been very busy, and we hope that you're enjoying the new features that we're adding to the solution. So with that, I'm going to wrap up and turn it over to Charles for whatever questions have come in.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, let's get my questions over here. We want to be respectful and finish on the hour, so I won't ask all of them. First question, great new features. I've been building clauses in a library using objects. What is the advantage of the new clause library instead of building clause objects?
Excellent question. So yeah, with custom objects, you could link to a custom object to pull in text. And that is a way that some customers have created clauses already. The major advantage is the other automation features are available to you in clauses and clause library. So custom object, you're just providing text. So if you had a clause that was just text that you didn't need to link into any template elements or provide any conditional logic, then it will work great for you. But if you want the added functionality of conditional logic, links to input elements from the template, you definitely want to use clause library for that.
Okay, next up, is Legito Sign, probably one I should answer really, is Legito Sign as legal as DocuSign or Adobe Sign?
You should answer that.
Yeah, I probably should. So the answer is yes. There will be a few documents where there are very specific requirements that might preclude any digital signatures. But yes, the law in most countries is adapting now to make digital signatures very viable. And of course, Legito Sign is designed to meet those too. Okay. Next,
I might just add to that, Charles. I mean, we have followed standards for digital signature that are common and making sure that it's tokenized properly and that there is a proper stamp on the digital signature. So
okay, next one. Do JSON integrations send data in both directions?
So the JSON integration is really about pushing data into Legito. So it will be really about pushing data in. I think you likely could get data out, and we can modify in the future for that as well with added functionality. But at the moment, it's really about linking the data into Legito so that you can link it to specific template elements.
Okay. If you start using a clause library, can the author set controls to stop unauthorized changes to the clauses in the library?
So clauses can be permissioned just like templates. So clauses right now would only be able to be edited by those who have the template editing permission, and then they can be permissioned beyond that as well. You can say only these users can manage these templates within the system as well. So, so the same level of permissioning that you can put around template suites for authoring can be done around clauses.
Okay, thanks,
and,
Mark.
and the nice advantage there is you could have, okay, well, clauses are only managed by this one individual or these two individuals, but these other users can create templates. So you could even restrict it so that your template authors can manage templates and build them from the clause language, but they can't change any of the clause language.
Okay. Last one. When are the new features like clause libraries available to users?
Everything I've shown is in live production today. So everything I've shown today is in production.
Okay. Okay, well, that wraps up the questions. We'll give people back a few minutes of time from the scheduled webinar time. Mark, thank you very much. Probably worth saying to people, if you have any remaining questions after this, please do reach out and contact your normal Legito contact, or indeed Mark. If you'd like to see us expand on anything in this webinar, let us know that too. We also write articles. We write some longer monthly articles and some shorter weekly ones. And if anyone wants us to focus any of those on these new topics, do let us know. Otherwise, we look forward to welcoming you in future webinars. Thank you, everybody, for your attendance.
Thank you, everyone.